They called it the most preventable tragedy in modern medical history. March 2020, as COVID-19 spread across Iran, a rumor began circulating through WhatsApp groups and social media that drinking high-proof alcohol could cure or prevent the coronavirus. Within weeks, over 5,000 people had been poisoned, 700 were dead, and hundreds of survivors would never see again. But this wasn't the first time methanol had stolen sight from desperate people seeking healing. From bootleg liquor in India that has killed thousands, to contaminated hand sanitizer in Mexico, to home remedies gone wrong in Turkey, the pattern repeats with horrifying consistency. A clear, odorless liquid that costs pennies per gallon becomes a weapon of mass blindness when desperation meets misinformation. This is the true story of how methanol, simple wood alcohol, has created more blind victims than any other chemical in human history, and why, despite knowing exactly how to prevent it, we keep letting it happen. The science behind methanol poisoning reads like a horror novel written by chemistry itself. When you drink methanol, your body initially treats it like regular alcohol. You might even feel drunk, relaxed, seemingly fine. But inside, your liver is converting this imposter into formaldehyde. Yes, the same chemical used to preserve corpses, and then into formic acid. This acid has a terrifying specificity. It targets the optic nerve with the precision of a trained assassin. The cells in your retina and optic nerve are particularly vulnerable because they have high metabolic rates and limited blood flow to clear toxins. Within 12 to 24 hours, the formic acid begins destroying the myelin sheath that protects nerve fibers. Victims often describe the progression as watching the world slowly disappear. First, the colors drain away, then shadows creep in from the periphery, and finally, darkness. The cruelest part. The victim remains fully conscious, completely aware as their world vanishes pixel by pixel. Doctors who treat methanol poisoning report that patients often don't believe they're going blind until it's too late, insisting they just need rest or stronger glasses. The 2020 Iranian methanol crisis became the largest mass poisoning in the country's history, and it started with a deadly combination of pandemic fear and alcohol prohibition. In Iran, where alcohol is illegal, bootleggers have always operated in shadows, but COVID-19 created a perfect storm. Social media posts claimed that drinking alcohol could kill the virus in your throat. Fake CDC screenshots circulated, suggesting that vodka could act as internal disinfectant. Desperate people who had never drunk alcohol in their lives suddenly sought it out as medicine. The bootleggers, seeing unprecedented demand, cut corners catastrophically. They used industrial methanol, which costs about $0.30 per liter, instead of ethanol, which costs 10 times more. Some mixed it with bleach, believing this would make it more effective against the virus. The concoctions were flavored with fruit juice and sold in recycled water bottles, medicine containers, even baby formula jars. If you're finding this information valuable and potentially life-saving, please hit that like button. It helps us reach more people with these critical warnings from real medical disasters. The first wave of victims appeared in the northern provinces of Gilan and Mazandaran. Dr. Hossein Hassanian, an advisor to Iran's health ministry, reported scenes of unimaginable horror in hospital emergency rooms. Parents carried in unconscious children who had been given spoonfuls of the supposed cure. Elderly people who had never touched alcohol arrived in comas. One survivor, identified only as Mohammed, told reporters he watched his wife and daughter die within hours of each other after sharing a bottle of what they thought was protective medicine. But the deaths, while tragic, weren't the only horror. Hundreds of survivors faced a fate some considered worse: permanent, irreversible blindness. A 45-year-old teacher named Rashid described the progression. First, I saw everything through fog. Then colors became gray. I told myself it was exhaustion from the virus. By morning, I was feeling for the walls to find the bathroom. By afternoon, my world was black forever. The pattern of methanol mass poisonings extends far beyond Iran, revealing a global crisis hiding in plain sight. In India, where bootleg liquor kills over 1,000 people annually, entire villages have been devastated. The 2019 Assam tragedy left 168 dead and dozens blind after consuming locally made country liquor contaminated with methanol. In 2011, West Bengal saw 172 deaths in 48 hours from methanol-laced alcohol sold for less than 30 cents per pouch. These weren't isolated incidents, but part of a recurring nightmare. The victims are almost always the poor. Laborers who can't afford licensed liquor, turning to cheap alternatives that promise the same escape. One survivor from the Punjab poisoning of 2020, where 121 died, described the bootleg liquor market. Everyone knows it might kill you, but when you work 14 hours in the fields and your body screams with pain, you take the risk. One day of relief seems worth it. The economics are brutally simple. Legal alcohol is taxed heavily, creating a massive market for untaxed, unregulated alternatives. Subscribe now if you want to understand more about these preventable tragedies that mainstream media often ignores. Knowledge that could literally save lives. The medical response to methanol poisoning is a race against time that hospitals often lose. The standard treatment sounds almost absurd. Doctors give victims pharmaceutical-grade ethanol, essentially getting them drunk on purpose. The ethanol competes with methanol for the same enzymes in the liver, preventing the conversion to formaldehyde and formic acid, but this only works if administered within hours of ingestion. Once the optic nerve damage begins, no treatment can reverse it. In developing countries, hospitals often lack the basic diagnostic tools to identify methanol poisoning quickly. Blood gas analyzers that can detect the characteristic metabolic acidosis cost thousands of dollars. The specific antidote, fomepizole, costs $1,000 per vial, with treatment requiring multiple vials. In the Iranian crisis, some hospitals ran out of ethanol for treatment. Desperate doctors used vodka from confiscated police evidence, mixed homemade solutions, and even had family members smuggle in drinking alcohol. One nurse in Tehran described mixing pharmaceutical ethanol with orange juice and administering it through feeding tubes to unconscious patients, praying it wasn't too late. What makes these tragedies particularly infuriating is how preventable they are. Adding a simple bittering agent to industrial methanol would make it undrinkable, costing pennies per gallon. Denatonium benzoate, the world's most bitter substance, could save thousands of lives annually. But manufacturers resist, claiming it would interfere with industrial processes. Governments could mandate the addition of dyes to industrial alcohol, making it visually obvious that it's not for consumption. But they don't. The technology exists to test alcohol for methanol contamination instantly, portable devices that cost less than $100, but they're not distributed to vulnerable communities. The knowledge to prevent these poisonings has existed for decades, published in medical journals, discussed at conferences, documented in report after report. Yet the killing continues. A WHO report estimated that methanol poisoning affects over 30,000 people globally each year, with a case fatality rate of 20 to 40% and permanent visual impairment in 20 to 40% of survivors. These aren't statistics, they're preventable blindness, preventable deaths, preventable tragedies repeated endlessly. The survivors of methanol poisoning form a hidden community of the chemically blinded. In Iran, support groups have formed where victims teach each other to navigate darkness. They share techniques for pouring tea without spilling, for recognizing people by voice, for maintaining dignity in a seeing world. Many report that the psychological trauma exceeds the physical disability. Knowing that their blindness came from seeking health, from trying to protect their families, creates a unique form of survivor's guilt. Children who went blind from methanol-contaminated hand sanitizer during COVID-19 face a lifetime of darkness because their parents tried to keep them safe. The social stigma compounds the tragedy. In many cultures, blindness is seen as divine punishment or bad karma. Victims lose not just their sight but their jobs, their marriages, their place in society. One Iranian survivor said, "The methanol took my eyes, but shame took everything else." Today, as you read this, someone, somewhere, is about to drink methanol-contaminated alcohol. Maybe it's a laborer in India, exhausted after a brutal day. Maybe it's a teenager in Mexico, trying bootleg liquor at a party. Maybe it's a desperate parent in Africa, giving their sick child what they think is medicine. The methanol crisis isn't history. It's happening right now, a continuous tragedy playing out in emergency rooms worldwide. The solutions exist. The knowledge exists. What's missing is the will to act, the pressure to change, the voices demanding that this preventable blindness ends. If this story angered you, good. Use that anger. Share this video with everyone you know. Comment below if you've encountered suspicious alcohol or remedies in your community. Your warning could save someone a sight. The blind victims of methanol can't see this video, but you can be their voice. Every share, every conversation, every person made aware is a potential life saved, a potential blindness prevented. Because in the end, the most tragic aspect of methanol poisoning isn't just that it happens, it's that we know exactly how to stop it, and we don't.